Is that really me?
Imagine this. Your phone rings. It quotes a number you don't recognize, but the voice on the other end is one you would know anywhere. It quotes your son, your mother, your partner. Their voice is choked with panic. They quote in trouble. There's been an accident. They need money wired right now. Every instinct in your body, every fiber of your being, screams at you to help. But what if that voice isn't them? Today we are sharing 4 true terrifying stories of a new kind of horror, where your own voice and the voices of those you love become the perfect weapon in the hands of a stranger. The true terror of this new reality is how it hijacks our most fundamental human connection, trust. The sound of a loved one's voice is supposed to be our anchor, our ground truth. But what do you do when that truth can be perfectly, flawlessly faked? This is the horrifying dilemma of modern voice cloning scams. It's a psychological trap that weaponizes your love and your empathy against you, leaving you with an impossible choice. Ignore a desperate plea for help, or fall victim to a deception so perfect that your own ears can no longer tell you what is real. But how can you possibly tell the difference? By exploring these real, chilling accounts, from a fake boss demanding credentials to a bank verification call that knows your history, we will uncover the insidious tactics used in these scams. These stories are more than just terrifying, cautionary tales. They are an urgent, necessary guide to understanding a threat that is no longer science fiction, but a very real and very present danger. Now, before we answer the phone, make sure you are subscribed to Whispered Fear and have activated the bell. You need to be sure you know who is really on the other end of the line.
Mom, I need your help.
Our first story is about the weaponization of love. It's about the primal biological instinct of a parent to protect their child, and how that sacred instinct can be hijacked by a new, terrifying, and utterly invisible kind of predator. It comes from a woman named Susan, a recent widow who learned that the most dangerous monster in the world is not the one that breaks down your door, but the one that calls you on the phone, crying for help, in the perfect, unmistakable, and completely fake voice of your own son. At 56, Susan's world was a quiet kingdom of one. Her husband of 30 years, David, had been taken by a sudden, brutal heart attack a year prior, leaving a silence in their comfortable suburban home in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, that was louder than any sound she had ever known. Her life, once a bustling symphony of family, was now a quiet, solitary routine. Her only son, Daniel, her pride and joy, was a sophomore at the University of North Carolina, just a few miles away. But he was building a life of his own, and she was fiercely proud of him, even as she ached with a profound and often suffocating loneliness. Her house, a beautiful, 2-story colonial on a quiet tree-lined street called Glen Lennox Drive, was her sanctuary. But it was also a museum of a life that was now in the past. She was a woman adrift in a sea of memory, and her son's voice, on their nightly phone calls, was her only lighthouse. The call that would pull her into a storm of psychological terror came on a Tuesday afternoon. It was a normal day. She had spent the morning gardening, her hands in the familiar, comforting soil. She was in the kitchen, making a cup of tea, the house filled with the quiet, peaceful sounds of a suburban afternoon. Her phone rang. The caller ID was a number she didn't recognize, with a Virginia area code. She almost let it go to voicemail. But a small, nagging flicker of maternal anxiety, the what if that lives in the heart of every parent, made her answer. "Hello," she said, her voice calm. And then she heard it, a sound that bypassed every logical filter in her brain and hit her directly in the soul. It was the sound of her son, Daniel, crying. Not a sad cry, but a raw, ragged, and utterly terrified sobbing. The voice on the warm other end choked out between shuddering gasps. "Mom?" It was his voice. The exact pitch, the familiar, slightly nasal quality, the way the word "mom" always sounded like a question. It was him. She said, her own heart a sudden cold fist in her chest. Daniel? Oh my God, what is it? What's wrong? The teacup she was holding slipped from her fingers and shattered on the tile floor. He sobbed. I'm in so much trouble, Mom. There was an accident. I was driving with Michael, up near Charlottesville, and I hit someone. The words were a physical blow. Michael was Daniel's best friend and roommate. Charlottesville was a plausible destination, a college town just a few hours' drive away. Her mind, already primed for panic, latched onto the details. They were real. They were plausible. She repeated, her mind racing. An accident? Is anyone hurt? Are you okay? He cried. I'm okay, but the other guy, he's hurt bad. And Mom, they found beer in the car. It wasn't mine, I swear it was Michael's, but I blew a .09. I'm over the limit. They've arrested me. I'm at the police station. They're going to charge me with a DUI with injury. They're talking about prison, Mom. Prison, the word hung in the air, a monstrous, unthinkable thing. Her son, her brilliant, kind, and gentle son in prison. It was a reality her mind could not and would not accept. She said, her own voice a strained, trembling imitation of calm, a mother's instinct kicking in. Okay, just breathe. Sweetheart. Where are you? Which station? I'll call a lawyer. I'll be there in a few hours. The voice on the other end shouted, a new, sharp edge of panic in his tone. No. You can't. They said if we can handle this now quietly, we can make it go away. The public defender they gave me, a Mr. Green, he's here. He said the other guy doesn't have insurance. If we can pay for the damages, pay his medical bills right now, he won't press charges. It quote us a one-time offer, Mom. Please, you have to help me. She said instantly. Of course I'll help you. How much? I'll transfer the money right now. He choked out, the number followed by a fresh wave of desperate sobs. It's $9,000. I know it's a lot, but it's either this or I lose everything. My scholarship, my future, my whole life. A new voice, a man's voice, calm, professional, and authoritative, suddenly came on the line. Ma'am? My name is David Green. I'm the attorney representing your son. He quote "S a good kid. He just made a very, very stupid mistake. But we have a small window here to mitigate the damage. The other party is willing to settle, but it has to be now, before this goes in front of a judge. If you can wire the funds to the escrow account I'm about to give you, we can have your son out of here in an hour. He gave her the account information, the routing numbers, the name of a holding company. He was smooth, professional, and utterly convincing. He used all the right words. He sounded exactly like a tired, overworked, but competent public defender, he added, his voice low and serious. And ma'am, I have to advise you in the strongest possible terms not to try and call your son's cell phone. He is in custody. His phone has been confiscated. Any attempt to contact him directly will be seen as an attempt to interfere with a police investigation, and it will make things much, much worse for him. Do you understand? Yes, she whispered, her mind a numb fog of terror and a singular, powerful need to protect her child. She hung up the phone. For a moment, she just stood in her silent kitchen, the shattered teacup a small, forgotten casualty on the floor. Her mind was a high-speed checklist of logistics. $9,000. It was a lot, but it was doable. She had some savings, an emergency fund her husband had insisted they keep. She would have to go to the bank, the local Bank of America, branch on Franklin Street. She grabbed her purse, her car keys, her heart a frantic, wild drum. But as she was about to run out the door, a small, quiet, and deeply buried part of her, the logical, skeptical part, whispered a question. It was a tiny, insignificant detail. Daniel, in his panic, had said, "Please, Mom, don't tell Dad." David, her husband, had been dead for over a year. It was a mistake, a slip of the tongue in a moment of extreme duress. That quote is what her panicked maternal mind told her. A boy in that much trouble would revert, would cry out for both his parents. It was a logical explanation. But the other part of her, The part that was now cold and sharp with a new and terrifying suspicion knew that it was a mistake her real son would never make. She stood in her hallway, her hand on the doorknob, a war raging within her. The primal, overwhelming need to save her child versus this tiny, cold, and inescapable piece of data that did not fit the narrative. She made a decision. She pulled out her phone. The lawyer had told her not to call Daniel's phone. But he hadn't said anything about his roommate. She found Michael's number in her contacts and pressed call, her heart pounding with a new and different kind of fear. The fear of being right. The phone rang once, twice. And then a familiar, cheerful, and utterly calm voice answered. "Hey, Mrs. Jensen. What's up?" she said, her voice a dry crackle. "Michael, where is Daniel? I need to speak to him. It's an emergency." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Michael said, a note of confusion in his voice. "He's right here. We're at the library, the Davis Library. We have a huge organic chemistry midterm tomorrow. He quote, "S been here all day. Is everything okay?" She whispered. He's with you? Right now?" "Yeah, he's right across the table," Michael said. "His phone is off. He's in super study mode. Hold on, I'll put him on." She heard a muffled voice, the phone being passed. And then his voice, his real voice. Not crying, not terrified. Just the familiar, loving voice of her own son. "Hey, Mom, what's going on? Is everything all right?" She collapsed onto the floor of her hallway, a raw, guttural sob of pure, unadulterated relief tearing from her throat. He was safe. He was fine. He was in the library. The other voice, the crying, terrified voice that had been a perfect, flawless replica of her son's, it had been a lie. A performance. A monstrous and technologically perfect act of psychological warfare. The police, when she called them, were not surprised. They were grimly, wearily familiar with the story. The Chapel Hill police officer had explained to her. "It's a new kind of scam, ma'am. It's becoming more and more common." He explained the chilling and deeply unsettling technology behind it. Voice cloning. Scammers, using sophisticated AI software, can take just a few seconds of a person's voice from a public TikTok video, a Facebook post, a voicemail greeting, and create a perfect, real-time, and emotionally responsive replica. They then use data scraped from public online profiles to build a plausible and deeply personal narrative. The friend's name, the recent trip, the make of the car. It was all there, on her son's public Instagram page, an arsenal of personal data waiting to be weaponized. She had not been the victim of a random, opportunistic crime. She had been the target of a meticulous and technologically advanced intelligence operation. They had not just stolen her son's voice. They had stolen his life and used it as a mask to trick her into giving up her own. She is left with a silence in her life that is a new and far more terrifying kind of quiet. She still talks to her son on the phone every night. But now, a small, cold, and permanent part of her is always listening. Not to the words, but to the voice itself. Is it really him? Is the cadence right? Is there a flicker of something, a tiny digital artifact that would betray the lie? The fortress of her maternal instinct, her most primal and trusted sense, has been breached. She is haunted by the quiet, chilling knowledge that in the modern world, your own ears can lie to you. And she is left with a final, heartbreaking, and unanswerable question. If she hadn't noticed that one small, insignificant slip-up, the mention of a dead husband, would she have sent the money? And if she had, and the line had gone dead, how long would she have waited for her son, the one who was never in trouble, to come home?
We have a problem.
Our next story is about the weaponization of authority. It quotes about the implicit trust we place in the voices of our superiors, the ones who hold our careers, our futures, in their hands. It comes from a young man named Kevin, a data analyst who learned that in the modern world, The most dangerous hacker isn't the one who breaks through a firewall, but the one who walks straight through the front door, wearing the trusted, authoritative, and perfectly cloned voice of your own. Boss? At 26, Kevin's life was a vertical ascent. His world was the 58th floor of the Salesforce Tower in downtown San Francisco, a gleaming, glass and steel monument to the new gods of the tech industry. He was a junior data analyst for a high-powered cybersecurity firm called Viridian Sentry, a subsidiary of the same Viridian from a previous story. His job was to protect other companies from the very kind of digital phantoms he was about to encounter. He was a digital ghost hunter, a man who understood that the modern world was a battlefield of data, and that the greatest threats were the ones you couldn't see. He was good at his job. He was ambitious. His entire life was a carefully constructed plan for success, a plan that left little room for error and even less for failure. His boss, a man named Marcus Thorne, was a legend in the industry, a sharp, demanding, and brilliant executive whose approval was the holy grail for every junior analyst at the firm. Thorne's voice was an instrument of power. It was a calm, deep, and authoritative baritone that could dissect a flawed security protocol from 100 yards away. Kevin and his colleagues knew that voice better than they knew their own. It was the voice of their ambition, of their fear, and of their professional salvation. The night of the attack was a Wednesday. Kevin was working late, a common occurrence. He was the lead analyst on a critical project for a major client, a multi-billion-dollar e-commerce company. He was deep in the weeds, sifting through terabytes of data, searching for a subtle, almost invisible vulnerability in their network. The office was a ghost town, the sprawling open-plan workspace a dark, silent sea of empty desks and sleeping computer monitors. His only company was the quiet hum of the server racks and the panoramic, glittering view of the San Francisco Bay. At 9:15 p.m., his desk phone rang. The sound was a jarring intrusion in the profound silence. He looked at the caller ID. It was Marcus Thorne. His heart gave a small, anxious lurch. A call from Thorne. This late could only mean one thing: a crisis. Kevin here, he answered, his voice a crisp, professional instrument. Kevin, thank God I reached you. The voice on the other end was Thorne's, but it was a version of Thorne he had never heard before. The calm, authoritative baritone was gone, replaced by a strained, ragged, and deeply panicked whisper. We have a problem, a big one. What is it, Marcus? Kevin asked, already pulling up a new diagnostic screen on his computer. It's the North Star project, Thorne rasped, naming the massive e-commerce client Kevin was working on. There's been a breach, a big one. They're in the main payment processing server. Right now, I quote, am looking at it from my home system. They're siphoning data, we quote, re-talking millions of credit card numbers. It's a catastrophe. A wave of cold, professional dread washed over Kevin. This was the nightmare scenario, the one they trained for, the one they built entire digital fortresses to prevent. I'm trying to initiate a lockdown protocol from my end, Thorne continued, his voice a frantic, breathless sound. But they've locked me out. They quote, compromised my credentials. I'm a ghost in our own system. You quote, the only one in the building. You're the only one with direct physical access to the server terminal. What do you need me to do? Kevin asked, his own voice now tight with adrenaline. There was a pause on the other end of the line, a sound of a shuddering breath. This is going to sound crazy, Kevin, and it is a direct violation of every security protocol we have. But we are out of time. He took another ragged breath. I need your credentials. I need your admin level login and your RSA token key. Now. There quote s a backend command I can run from my system, but I need to tunnel through an active, authenticated user profile. It quote s the only way I can get in and kill the breach before they take everything. The world seemed to slow down. The hum of the servers seemed to grow louder. Never, under any circumstances, share your security credentials. It was the first and most sacred rule of their profession. It was a rule that had been drilled into him from his first day at the RE company. To violate it was a fireable offense. It was professional suicide. Marcus, I can't do that, Kevin stammered, his mind a battlefield of conflicting protocols. It's against policy. Damn the policy, Kevin, Thorne's voice roared, a sudden terrifying explosion of rage and desperation. Do you know what's at stake? Here, our biggest client, the reputation of this entire firm. Your job, my job, all of it, gone. In the next 5 minutes, unless you do exactly what I tell you to do. The rage was as convincing as the panic. It was Thorne. The demanding, high-stakes, and utterly uncompromising man he had come to both fear and admire. We have seconds, Kevin, not minutes. The voice hissed, the panic returning. I need your login, and I need the 6-digit code from your security token. Read it to me. Now. Kevin looked at his own computer screen, at the blinking cursor. He looked at the small gray RSA token on his desk, the small black numbers changing every 60 seconds, a quiet digital heartbeat. He was being asked to choose between two catastrophic outcomes, insubordination in the face of a crisis, or a direct violation of the company's most sacred rule. His mind, his logical, analytical mind, was paralyzed. But the voice on the other end of the phone, the panicked, desperate voice of his boss, the man who held his entire future in his hands, was the deciding factor. He made a decision that would, in the next 10 minutes, destroy his entire world. Okay, he whispered, his voice a dry crackle. Okay, I'm sending it. He typed his username and his complex 24-character password into a secure chat window he had opened with Thorne. And then, he read the 6 simple and utterly devastating numbers from his RSA token aloud. Thank you, Kevin, the voice on the other end breathed, a sound of profound relief. You're doing the right thing. You're saving the company. Stay on the line. I quote, I'll tell you when it's done. He sat there, in the silent, 58th floor office, his body trembling with the aftershocks of the adrenaline, and he listened to the silence on the other end of the line. He had done it. He had broken the rule, but he had saved the day. He was a hero. A minute passed, then 2. The silence on the other end of the line was absolute. Marcus, he said, is it working? No answer. And then his own computer screen, which had been displaying the diagnostic data, went black. A single small white line of text appeared in the center of the screen. It read, Authentication successful. Data transfer initiated. Thank you for your cooperation. A new kind of fear, a fear that was cold and digital and had nothing to do with hackers, began to creep up his spine. The message was not from his own system. It was a confirmation, a receipt. He tried to call Thorne's number back from his desk phone. It went straight to a busy signal. He fumbled for his cell phone and called Thorne's personal number, a number he was only supposed to use in a dire emergency. It rang twice and then he answered. Kevin, what's going on? It's 9:30 at night. It was Thorne's voice, but it was the wrong voice. It was the calm, deep, and authoritative baritone of his boss, a man who was clearly at home, having a quiet evening. It was not the voice of a man in the middle of a catastrophic cyber attack. Marcus, Kevin whispered, his own voice a hollow, empty sound. The breach. North Star. You just called me. There was a long, cold, and terrifying silence on the other end of the line. Thorne said, his voice now dangerously quiet. Kevin, I have no idea what you are talking about. I haven't called you. I'm at home, having dinner with my family. Now, you tell me, right now, what is going on? The final, horrifying, and utterly devastating truth of the last 15 minutes crashed down on him. The voice on the phone. It had not been his boss. It had been a performance, a perfect, flawless, and technologically brilliant performance. He was still on the phone with the real Marcus Thorne, his own words a frantic, incoherent confession, when the first wave of automated security alerts hit his inbox. Unauthorized admin-level access from an external IP address. System firewall. Deactivated. Mass data transfer initiated from server NS-77. He had not saved the company. He had just, with his own trembling hands, given the keys to the kingdom to a ghost with a perfect and utterly convincing voice. The investigation that followed was a brutal, merciless autopsy of his own failure. The company's forensic team, a group of the best digital detectives in the world, pieced together the story. It had been a sophisticated and highly targeted social engineering attack. The attackers had researched the company, the project, and him. They knew he was a junior analyst. They knew he was working late and alone. They knew his boss's name, and they had his voice. The lead investigator explained the technology to him, his voice a mixture of pity and professional awe. It was a new and terrifyingly effective form of cybercrime. Real-time voice cloning. Using just a few seconds of a person's voice, from a public YouTube video of a conference speech, from a company podcast, from a single hacked voicemail, a powerful AI could create a perfect, emotionally responsive, and utterly convincing replica. It could simulate panic and anger and desperation. It was the ultimate tool of psychological manipulation. Kevin was not just a victim. He was the human vulnerability in an otherwise perfect system. He was the backdoor that no firewall could patch. He was fired, of course. His career, his dream, the entire carefully constructed blueprint of his life was deleted. He is now haunted by a sound. The sound of his own boss's voice. A voice he had trusted implicitly. A voice that he now knows can be worn, like a mask, by a stranger. He is left with a quiet, chilling knowledge that has made it impossible for him to ever truly trust a voice on the phone again. He knows that the most dangerous weapon in the world is not a gun or a bomb. It is a familiar, trusted, and perfectly replicated sound. And he is left with a final and deeply unsettling question. The next time your phone rings and you hear the voice of someone you love in trouble, begging for your help, how can you be sure? How can you ever really be sure?
We just need to verify.
Our next story is about the weaponization of history. Your history. It's about the quiet, digital ghosts of our own lives. Every purchase, every transaction, every forgotten data point, and how those ghosts can be resurrected and used against us. It comes from a woman named Carol, a retiree who learned that the most dangerous con artists don't just guess your secrets. They buy them. And they use the comforting, familiar rhythm of your own past to trap you in a nightmare from which there is no escape. At 68, Carol's life was a fortress of meticulous order. She was a retired accountant, a woman who had spent 40 years of her life in a world of numbers, of balanced ledgers, of a reality that could be neatly organized into columns of debits and credits. After her husband passed, she had moved to the Villages, Florida, a massive, self-contained retirement community that was, in itself, a fortress of engineered tranquility. Her small, perfectly maintained home on a quiet street called Buena Vista Boulevard was her kingdom. Her life was a pleasant, predictable routine. Morning, water aerobics at the community pool. Afternoons tending her small garden of hibiscus flowers, and evenings spent carefully managing the nest egg she and her husband had spent a lifetime building. She was a woman who trusted numbers, who trusted patterns, who trusted verification. The phone call that would dismantle her fortress of order came on a Tuesday afternoon. She was in her kitchen, paying her monthly bills online. A routine she performed with the same practiced precision she had used in her professional life. Her phone rang, the caller ID displaying a name that was both familiar and immediately reassuring. Bank of America. She answered, her voice the calm, polite tone of a woman who is in complete control of her world. Hello, this is Carol. A voice on the other end replied. It was a young man's voice, professional, articulate, and infused with a calm, reassuring authority. Good afternoon, Mrs. Henderson. My name is David, and I'm a senior fraud prevention specialist with Bank of America. I'm calling from our security department. How are you today? I'm fine, thank you, Carol said, a small, cold knot of anxiety beginning to form in her stomach. A call from the fraud department was never good news. The man continued, his tone a perfect mixture of professional concern and calm competence. Ma'am, the reason I'm calling is that our system has flagged some unusual activity on your debit card. Before we proceed, I just need to verify your identity to ensure I'm speaking with the account holder. I'm going to ask you a few questions about some recent and past transactions. This is just for your security. Of course, Carol said. This was standard procedure, she knew the drill. The young man said, the sound of a keyboard clicking softly in the background. Okay. I'm showing a charge from 2 days ago at the public supermarket on La Plaza Parkway for $47.18. Can you confirm that transaction? Oh, yes, Carol said, her anxiety lessening slightly. She had been there 2 days ago. That was the correct amount. Yes, I can. Excellent, the man replied. And I'm showing a much older transaction from, let's see, May of 2019. A charge for $212 to Delta Airlines. Can you recall that purchase, ma'am? Why Carol paused, her mind sifting through the archives of her own memory. May of 2019. That was the trip she and her late husband had taken to Chicago to see their son. Yes, she said, a wave of nostalgia and a faint pang of grief washing over her. Yes, I remember. The familiarity was the key. The young man on the other end of the line was not just asking generic questions. He was citing specific, accurate, and deeply personal details from her own financial history. He was proving, with every correct data point, that he was exactly who he said he was. The fortress of her skepticism began to crumble, replaced by a growing sense of trust. This man was here to help. Perfect, ma'am. Thank you for verifying, he said. And then, his tone shifted. The calm procedural voice was replaced by one of quiet, controlled urgency. Ma'am, the reason for the flag is a charge that was attempted just 3 minutes ago. An online purchase for $3,500 for a series of international plane tickets on an airline based in Eastern Europe. Can you confirm that you made this purchase? What? The word was a choked gasp. No, of course not. I'm at home, the man said, his voice now a soothing, authoritative balm. That's what we thought. It appears your card information has been compromised. The good news is, our system caught it and blocked the transaction. Your money is safe. However, we need to act immediately to secure your accounts. The relief was so profound it was almost dizzying, quickly replaced by a new adrenalized sense of panic. She asked, her voice trembling. What do I need to do? It's a simple process, ma'am. I'm going to walk you through it. We need to perform a full security reset on your online banking profile. I have already locked your debit card, so no more transactions can go through. Now, I need you to log into your online account on your computer, and I will guide you through the next steps. She was already at her computer. Her hands were shaking as she typed in the Bank of America website address. She navigated to the login page, the familiar red and blue logo, a symbol of safety. Her voice was a dry whisper. Okay, I'm at the login page. Excellent, the man said. Now, for the final verification step, I need you to read me your username and password, so I can confirm it matches the credentials on my end before we reset them. This was it. The moment that should have been a blaring red siren. For 40 years as an accountant, she had lived by one sacred rule: never, ever give out your password. But the man on the phone wasn't a stranger. He wasn't a random email from a foreign prince. He had proven his identity. He knew her past. He had just saved her from a major financial loss. He was the bank. He was help. Okay, she said, her voice small. She read him her username. And then she took a deep breath, and she read him her password, a combination of her late husband's name and the year they were married. A secret, she thought, that was hers alone. Thank you, ma'am, the man said. One final step. Our system is now sending a 2-factor authentication code to your cell phone. This is to verify this new device, my terminal, as a trusted source. Please read me that 6-digit code as soon as you receive it. Her phone chimed, A text message. It contained a 6-digit number. She read it to him. Perfect, he said. The reset is in progress. Please do not touch your computer for the next 5 minutes as our system purges the corrupted data. I quote, else stay on the line with you. She sat at her desk, her body trembling with the aftershocks of the adrenaline, and she waited. She felt a profound sense of gratitude for the calm, competent young man on the other end of the line, for the digital fortress of her bank that had protected her. And then, her phone rang again. It was a different call, an incoming call that interrupted her call with the bank. The caller ID was a name that made her heart leap. Her son, Michael. David, I'm sorry, I have to take this, she said to the man from the bank. It's my son. Of course, ma'am, the man said. She switched to the new call. Michael, honey, is everything okay? And then she heard it. The same sound that had shattered the world of our previous narrator. The sound of her own child, crying. Not a sad cry, but a raw, terrified, and utterly convincing sobbing. His voice choked out. Mom, I'm in trouble. I'm in so much trouble. It was her son's voice, his perfect, familiar, and beloved voice. But it was speaking the lines from a different nightmare, a different scam, a story of a car accident, of an arrest, of a desperate, one-time only chance to make it all go away with a wire transfer. She stood in her quiet, sunlit kitchen, a phone pressed to each ear, listening to two separate and utterly convincing realities playing out at the same time. The calm, professional voice of the bank on one side, and the terrified, sobbing voice of her son on the other. And in that moment of impossible, surreal, and horrifying contradiction, the final, devastating truth of what was happening crashed down on her. Neither of them were real. The technologies of voice cloning and data mining had converged into a single, perfect, and inescapable trap. The first caller hadn't just been a man with a list of her old transactions. He had been a data miner, a historian of her stolen life. And his job was to build the trust, to lower the walls, to prime the target. The second call, the one from her son, that was the real weapon. A perfectly cloned, emotionally devastating assault, designed to bypass all logic and hit her directly in her most vulnerable place, her mother's heart. She hung up both calls. A silent, guttural scream caught in her throat. She looked at her computer screen. The Bank of America login page was gone. In its place was a simple black screen with a single, small, and mocking line of text. It read, "Verification complete. Thank you for your business." She knew with a certainty that was the death of her entire carefully constructed world that her money was gone. The police, when they arrived, were kind, but there was little they could do. The calls were untraceable, routed through a dozen different countries. The money had been instantly converted to cryptocurrency and had vanished into the anonymous, unregulated ether of the dark web. The data they had used to build the trap, her old transactions, had likely been purchased for a few dollars from a data broker who had gotten it from one of the 100 different corporate data breaches that were a daily mundane fact of modern life. She was left with a horrifying and deeply personal truth. The fortress she had built to protect her life savings was a house of cards. And the key that had brought it all down was not a sophisticated piece of malware, but her own personal history. She had not been robbed by a stranger. She had been robbed by the ghosts of her own, quiet and digitally documented, life. She is left now with a silence that is not of peace, but of profound and permanent mistrust. She does not answer the phone. And she is haunted by the quiet, chilling knowledge that in the modern world, your past is no longer a memory. It is a weapon, patiently waiting for the right voice to pick it up.
It's an urgent matter.
Our final story is about the weaponization of bureaucracy. It's about the quiet, implicit trust we place in the institutions that govern our lives, our schools, our doctors, Our banks. It comes from a single mother named Maria, who learned that the most dangerous scams are not the ones that come with threats and red flags, but the ones that come wrapped in the mundane, official, and utterly convincing language of everyday life, spoken in a voice she had learned to trust. At 39, Maria's life was a meticulously managed balancing act. She was a single mother and an ER nurse at St. David's Medical Center in Austin, Texas. Her world was a controlled chaos of 12-hour shifts, of life and death decisions, and of the profound, bone-deep exhaustion that came from holding the lives of strangers in her hands. Her entire life, her entire being, was dedicated to one, singular, brilliant purpose: her 14-year-old son, Leo. Leo was her world. He was a quiet, fiercely intelligent freshman at Westlake High School, a nationally ranked public school in the affluent Eanes Independent School District, a place that felt a world away from their small rented duplex in a modest South Austin neighborhood. Getting him into Westlake had been a battle, a mountain of paperwork and special permissions. But he had earned his place. He was in the advanced STEM program, a quiet genius who was already light years ahead of his peers. For Maria, every grueling shift, every sacrifice, was worth it to keep him there, to give him the future she had never had. Her life was a constant, low-grade hum of financial anxiety and a fierce, protective, maternal pride. The voice of Mrs. Gable was, for Maria, the voice of that future. She was the administrative assistant at Westlake High, a woman with a warm, calm, and deeply competent voice, a voice that Maria had come to associate with permission slips, attendance records, and the quiet, orderly bureaucracy of her son's academic success. She had spoken to her on the phone a half-dozen times. She trusted that voice. The call that would turn that trust into a weapon came on a Tuesday afternoon, in the middle of what was already a circle of hell in the St. David's ER. A multi-car pileup on the I-35 had flooded the emergency room with a wave of trauma patients. The air was thick with the smell of antiseptic and blood. The sounds a cacophony of beeping monitors, of doctors shouting orders, of the quiet, desperate weeping of families in the waiting room. Maria was in the eye of the storm, a blur of focused, life-saving motion. Her phone, tucked into the pocket of her scrubs, vibrated. She almost ignored it. But the caller ID flashed a name she could not ignore: Westlake High School. She ducked into an empty supply closet, the only quiet space she could find, and answered, her heart giving a small, anxious lurch. A call from the school in the middle of the day was never good news. "This is Maria Rodriguez," she said, her voice professional, tense. "Hello, Miss Rodriguez. This is Helen Gable from the Westlake attendance office." The voice on the other end was perfect. It was the same warm, calm, and deeply competent voice she remembered. The same gentle southern lilt, the same professional empathy. It was Mrs. Gable. "Is everything okay?" Maria asked, her mind already cycling through a dozen terrible possibilities. "Is Leo all right?" "Leo is perfectly fine, Miss Rodriguez," the voice of Mrs. Gable said, and Maria felt a wave of relief so powerful it almost buckled her knees. "I apologize for calling you during your workday. I know you're a busy woman. But a small and rather urgent administrative issue has come to our attention." "An issue?" "Yes," the voice continued, a new, subtle, and very effective note of bureaucratic firmness in her tone. "It appears the supplementary lab fee for Leo's advanced robotics course was never paid. We've sent several email notices over the past month, but we haven't received a response. I'm afraid the deadline for payment to secure his spot in the program for the spring semester is today, at 5 p.m. Maria stared at the metal shelving of the supply closet, her mind reeling. A fee? She had paid all his fees at the beginning of the year. She was meticulous about it. And email notices? She checked her email a dozen times a day. She had seen nothing. I don't understand," she stammered. "I paid all the fees in August. I have the receipts." The voice on the other end let out a soft, patient, and slightly condescending sigh. "I'm sure you believe you did, Miss Rodriguez. But according to the district's new online payment portal, The fee is showing as outstanding. It quote essay. A new system this year. There have been glitches. It's possible your original payment was not processed correctly. Unfortunately, the district's policy on this is very strict. If the fee is not paid by 5 p.m., Leo will be automatically unenrolled from the program to make room for a student on the waiting list. The words were a quiet, bureaucratic, and utterly devastating blow. Leo quote his future. His place in the one program that he loved, the one thing that made his academic future so bright, was about to be taken away because of a glitch in a new payment system, and because of her own supposed negligence. The shame was a hot flush on her cheeks. "What can I do?" she asked, her voice a desperate whisper. "I'm at work. I can't leave. Can I pay it over the phone?" "Unfortunately, we are no longer authorized to take credit card payments over the phone for security reasons," the voice of Mrs. Gable said, the irony a sharp, bitter taste in Maria's mouth. "But because of the urgency, I have been authorized to provide you with a direct, secure payment link to the district's financial portal. I can text it to you right now. You can pay it directly from your phone. It only takes a minute." "Yes," Maria said instantly. "Yes, please. Text it to me." "I'm sending it now," the voice said. A moment later, her phone chimed with a new text message. It contained a hyperlink. "Once you have completed the payment," the voice continued, its tone now helpful, efficient, "the portal will generate an email receipt. It is very important that you forward that email receipt to me immediately, so I can clear the hold on Leo's account before the 5 p.m. deadline. It's the only way to guarantee his spot." "Okay," Maria said, her mind already focused on the new task. "Okay, I'll do it right now." "Thank you for your prompt attention to this matter, Miss Rodriguez," the voice said, the warm, professional tone returning. "You have a wonderful day." The line went dead. Maria stood in the quiet, sterile silence of the supply closet, her heart pounding with a new urgent rhythm. She had to fix this. She had to protect her son's future. She tapped on the link. It took her to a website that looked perfect. It had the official logo of the Eanes Independent School District. The color scheme was right. The font was right. It was a simple, professional, and utterly convincing payment portal. It asked for the student's name, the invoice number that Mrs. Gable had provided, and her credit card information. She didn't hesitate. She was a woman trained to act quickly and decisively in a crisis. This was a crisis. She entered the information, her fingers flying across the small screen. She hit submit. A new page appeared. "Thank you. Your payment has been processed." A moment later, an email arrived in her inbox. It was a perfectly formatted, official-looking receipt from the EISD Financial Services Department. She followed the final, crucial instruction. She forwarded the email to the address that Mrs. Gable had provided. And she felt a profound sense of relief. The crisis was averted. Her son was safe. She went back to the chaotic, life and death reality of her job, the small administrative fire of her personal life now extinguished. The truth did not arrive until that evening. She was at home, making dinner when Leo walked in, his backpack slung over his shoulder, his face a mask of teenage exhaustion. "Hey, honey," she said, her voice full of a love that was fierce and bright. "How was school?" "Fine," he mumbled, heading for the fridge. "Hey, did Mrs. Gable mention anything to you today about a lab fee for the robotics program?" Leo paused, the refrigerator door half open. He looked at her, his expression one of pure confusion. "Who's Mrs. Gable?" he asked. The world seemed to stop. Maria stammered. The woman in the attendance office, the one with the nice, friendly voice. Leo just shook his head. "Her name is Miss Davis, Mom. She's been there all year. I don't know any Mrs. Gable." The final, horrifying, and utterly devastating truth of the afternoon's phone call began to dawn on Maria. She ran to her laptop and pulled up the Westlake High School staff directory. She scrolled down to the attendance office. The name listed was Susan Davis, Quote, dot. There was no one named Helen Gable on the entire staff roster. She had not been talking to the school. She had been talking to a ghost with a perfect, warm, and competent voice. She logged into her bank account, her hand shaking so badly she could barely type the password. Dot. The charge was there. Not for the small, insignificant lab fee, but for the maximum daily limit on her credit card. $5,000. Transferred not to a school district, but to an untraceable offshore account. The police, when she called them, were kind but not surprised. It was a new and brutally effective form of phishing scam. The scammers, likely a sophisticated overseas operation, had done their homework. They had used public school websites and social media to find the name of her son, the school he attended, the specific advanced program he was in. They had created a perfect fake payment portal. And they had used the most powerful and terrifying new tool in the scammer's arsenal. Voice cloning. The officer explained the chilling science. The real Mrs. Gable had retired 2 years ago, but the greeting on her old office voicemail, her warm, friendly, and deeply trustworthy voice, was still on the school's automated phone system. The scammers had likely recorded that greeting. And with just a few seconds of her real human voice, a powerful AI program had been able to create a perfect, interactive, and emotionally responsive replica. A digital puppet that could say anything they wanted, in a voice that was designed to be trusted. The voice had been right. Everything else had been a lie. The final, brilliant, and deeply insidious part of the scam was the demand for the receipt. When she had forwarded the email, she had not just been confirming a payment. She had been handing the scammers a perfect digital copy of a legitimate-looking email from her own personal email address. An email they could now use as a template to create even more convincing, more personalized phishing scams to use on other unsuspecting parents. She had not just been a victim, she had been an unwilling accomplice. Maria was left with a silence that was a new and far more terrifying kind of quiet. She was left with the knowledge that her own best instincts, her desire to protect her child, her trust in a competent, authoritative voice, had been the very tools used to trap her. The fortress of her life had been breached not by a brute force attack, but by a simple, polite, and utterly convincing phone call. She is now haunted by a quiet, chilling, and deeply modern fear. In a world where any voice can be faked, where a few seconds of a recording can be turned into a perfect interactive weapon, how can you ever trust what you hear again? She is left with a final and deeply unsettling question. The next time her phone rings and she hears the familiar, trusted voice of her son's school on the other end of the line, what is she supposed to do? A son's desperate, faked cry for help, a boss's panicked, manufactured command, a bank agent's calm, stolen authority. And a school administrator's warm, artificial voice. These 4 stories are not about hauntings or monsters in the dark. They are about a new and terrifyingly real kind of ghost. The ghost in the machine. A digital phantom born from a few seconds of a real person's voice and weaponized to exploit our most fundamental human instinct: trust. The true horror of voice cloning is not in the technology itself, but in how it shatters our reality. For all of human history, the sound of a loved one's voice was an immutable truth, an anchor in a chaotic world. It was proof of identity. But that anchor is now gone. The line between real and artificial has been erased, and our own ears, the senses we have trusted since birth, can no longer be our guide. These stories reveal a chilling evolution in the art of the scam. The con artist no longer needs to be a master of disguise. They just need a snippet of audio and a powerful AI. They can wear the voice of your child, your boss, your parent, like a mask, turning your own love, your own fear, your own sense of duty, into a weapon against you. They leave us with a final, deeply unsettling question that will linger in the silence after every future phone call. The person you're talking to, how can you be sure it's really them? If these stories have made you question the voices you trust, prove you are the one in control by subscribing to Whispered Fear, leaving a like, and sharing this video. Your support helps us to amplify the warnings that need to be heard. But what if the voice deceiving you isn't a stranger on the phone? What if it's a colleague, a manager, a person you see every single day, who is slowly, methodically, making you question your own sanity? Click the video on your screen now as we investigate a different kind of psychological warfare. 4 true scary stories of gaslighting at work that you may not realize. See you there, if you can still trust your own judgment.